My beloved child. Someone stepped away from you, and you have been asking yourself why. You searched your own words, replayed old conversations, and wondered if you had somehow become too much, or not enough. But what if the reason had nothing to do with your value? What if they uncovered something about you that unsettled them, not because it was ugly, but because it demanded a kind of honesty they were not ready to face? That question has lingered quietly in places you rarely let anyone see. You smiled through ordinary days while carrying an invisible weight, hoping that time would explain what silence never could. Yet every unanswered moment became another page in a story you believed had already been written. What you could not see was that another chapter had begun long before you noticed the first sentence. You often imagine that broken connections happen in a single instant. A conversation. A message left unanswered. A door closing without warning. But hearts rarely change direction all at once. They drift. They hesitate. They wrestle with truths that feel too heavy to hold. And sometimes the distance begins the moment someone realizes you cannot be molded into the version of yourself that makes them comfortable. There is a difference between losing someone's attention and losing their illusion. The first can sting. The second can transform everything. Perhaps they discovered that your kindness was never weakness. Perhaps they realized your silence was not surrender but wisdom choosing the right moment. Or maybe they finally understood that beneath your gentle spirit lived a courage they could neither predict nor control. That realization can be unsettling for someone who only felt secure when they believed they understood every part of you. Have you noticed how certain people become uncomfortable the moment you begin to heal? It is a quiet shift. They laugh a little less. They ask fewer questions. Their encouragement grows strangely distant. Nothing dramatic happens on the surface, yet something invisible has changed. Healing has a way of revealing who celebrated your happiness, and who only recognized you through your struggles. The surprising part is this: they did not walk away because your light became brighter overnight. They stepped back because the story they had created about you no longer matched the person standing before them. Some relationships survive truth. Others survive only assumption. That realization may ache for a while. Even so, not every goodbye is punishment. Some are invitations disguised as endings. They clear space before you understand why the room needed to be emptied. At first it echoes with loneliness. Later, it becomes peaceful enough for your own voice to return. Listen closely. There are moments when life seems strangely quiet, almost as if the world itself is holding its breath. Those moments are easy to mistake for abandonment. Yet they often arrive just before something within you awakens. Not because everything outside has changed, but because your heart has finally stopped chasing explanations that were never meant to satisfy it. Imagine standing beside a still lake before sunrise. The water appears empty until the first light reveals what had been there all along. Your worth has always been like that water. Hidden only because the right light had not yet reached it. Someone saw a glimpse of that light. And instead of celebrating it, they became afraid of what it reflected back to them. That fear belonged to them. Not to you. Still, there is another layer to this story, one even you have not considered. What they uncovered was not simply your strength. It was the reason your strength existed. You have survived disappointments that could have hardened your heart forever, yet compassion remained. You carried questions without allowing bitterness to answer them. You continued offering grace after discovering how fragile trust could be. That kind of resilience cannot be borrowed. It is forged quietly, where applause never reaches. Few people recognize that kind of depth. Even fewer know how to stand beside it without feeling exposed. There is something remarkable about a person who refuses to become cruel after being misunderstood. Such a soul becomes a mirror, revealing hidden places inside everyone they encounter. Some see hope when they look into that mirror. Others see the parts of themselves they have spent years avoiding. Which reflection do you think they saw? The answer may surprise you. Because what unsettled them was not your past, and it was not your future. It was a single truth about your heart that quietly dismantled every assumption they had carried. They realized you were no longer waiting for someone else to tell you who you were. And the moment they understood that, everything between you changed. But they were not the only one watching. Someone unexpected noticed that same quiet transformation, and what happens next begins with a decision that has already started unfolding beyond your view. The decision unfolding beyond your view was never announced with noise. It arrived like the first breeze before a season changes, easy to overlook unless your heart had learned to listen. While you wondered why one connection faded into silence, another presence had already begun moving closer. Not in haste. Not to replace what was lost. But to meet the version of you that could never have been reached while you were still carrying yesterday's questions. Isn't it remarkable how often we stare at a closed door until our eyes forget to notice the open path beside it? For a while, you believed the greatest mystery was why someone chose to leave. Yet the deeper mystery has always been this: why did their departure create room for thoughts, dreams, and quiet moments you had ignored for so long? Nothing meaningful grows in soil that is constantly being disturbed. Sometimes stillness is not emptiness. It is preparation. There were evenings when your smile looked complete, yet your spirit whispered that something inside remained unfinished. You couldn't explain it. The world saw progress. But deep within, a small voice kept asking whether you were becoming who you truly were, or simply becoming acceptable to everyone else. That question was never meant to trouble you. It was meant to wake you. Because there comes a moment when approval becomes too expensive. Every compromise asks for another piece of your peace, until one day you barely recognize the person making everyone else comfortable. You were never created to disappear politely. You were meant to become fully alive. And that realization carries a quiet kind of power. The one who walked away sensed it before they could explain it. They noticed that your joy no longer depended on their attention. Your peace could survive unanswered messages. Your kindness no longer begged to be understood. Freedom changes the atmosphere around a person. Some are drawn toward it. Others instinctively retreat. Neither response defines your worth. It simply reveals where each heart stands in its own journey. But here's the part few people ever speak about. When someone releases their need to chase what keeps slipping away, life has an unusual habit of placing unexpected encounters directly in their path. Not because the universe owes them a reward. Not because every story ends perfectly. But because an open heart finally notices opportunities that fear once concealed. Think back for a moment. How many beautiful moments almost passed unnoticed because your attention was fixed on someone who had already stopped looking back? The laughter you nearly ignored. The invitation you almost declined. The stranger whose kindness stayed with you longer than expected. Small moments often carry the beginnings of extraordinary chapters. And somewhere among those unnoticed moments, a thread has already begun weaving itself into your story. You haven't recognized it yet. How could you? Some gifts enter quietly so they won't be mistaken for expectations. Meanwhile, the person who stepped away has been wrestling with something they never anticipated. Distance has a curious way of removing distractions. Without constant conversation, without familiar routines, people are often left alone with their own reflections. Sometimes they discover peace. Sometimes they discover regret. Sometimes they simply discover themselves. Whatever they find belongs to their path, not yours. Your story was never meant to pause while someone else searched for answers only they could uncover. There is a freedom in releasing the responsibility of finishing another person's journey. That burden was never yours to carry. Instead, notice what has changed within you. You no longer seek every explanation. You no longer measure your value by another person's consistency. You no longer mistake silence for a verdict. Those changes may seem invisible to others. But they are transforming everything. Imagine walking through a dense forest just before dawn. At first, every tree looks like an obstacle. Every shadow feels uncertain. Then light begins filtering through the branches, and suddenly the very path that seemed impossible has been there all along. The forest did not move. The light changed everything. Perhaps that is what has been happening inside you. Not perfection. Perspective. And perspective has a remarkable way of revealing blessings that panic could never recognize. Yet there remains one detail you have not seen. Someone has noticed this quiet strength growing within you, not because you announced it, but because genuine transformation has a way of speaking without words. This person isn't captivated by the version of you that tried to earn acceptance. They're drawn toward the peace you've begun carrying when no one is applauding. That difference matters more than you realize. Because admiration fades. Peace endures. Still, before this new connection can fully step into the light, one final echo from the past must lose its hold on your heart. It isn't another conversation. It isn't an apology. It isn't even closure in the way you once imagined. It's something far quieter. A single realization waiting to meet you at exactly the right moment. And when that realization arrives, you'll understand why the truth they uncovered about you was only the beginning of a much greater story. The realization did not arrive like thunder. It came softly. Almost gently. It appeared in the quiet space between missing someone and finally understanding why their absence no longer had the power to break you. For so long, you believed closure would come from their mouth. A confession. An explanation. A sentence that finally made the ache behave. But heaven was teaching you something deeper. Some answers do not arrive through the people who confused you. They arrive through the peace you feel after you stop begging confusion to become clear. That was the moment everything began shifting. Not around you. Within you. You started seeing the past differently. The silence was no longer a wall. It became a window. The distance was no longer proof that you had failed. It became evidence that something fragile could not follow you into a stronger season. And the person who cut someone off after finding out this truth about you, they were not simply choosing sides. They were recognizing alignment. They saw what others overlooked. They noticed how your soul had been treated in rooms where you kept giving people the benefit of the doubt. They heard the small details behind your pauses. They understood that your gentleness had been carrying scars with dignity. And something in them changed. They could no longer remain close to anyone who spoke lightly about what you survived. That is where the story turns. Because while you were learning to release the need to be defended, someone else was quietly deciding you were worth protecting, not controlling, not rescuing, not owning, protecting with respect. There is a sacred difference. Control says, I need you to be mine so I can feel secure. Protection says, I see your worth, and I will not stand comfortably beside anything that dishonors it. You may not have seen that decision happen. It may have unfolded in a conversation you were not invited into, through a look, a silence, a boundary finally drawn. But the energy around your story shifted the moment someone realized the truth about you. You were never difficult to love. You were difficult to misuse. Let that settle. The wrong people felt challenged by your boundaries. The right soul saw them as proof that you had finally come home to yourself. And when they saw that, they understood something they could not ignore. Anyone who tried to make you feel small was asking them to betray what their own heart already knew. So they stepped back from that person. Not dramatically. Not cruelly. But decisively. And now, a path that once seemed impossible is beginning to clear. Still, this is not the part where everything becomes simple. No true turning point ever does. Because before your heart can receive what is approaching, it must stop confusing intensity with devotion. Some people create storms and call it passion. Some disappear and call it space. Some return only when your peace becomes visible, hoping to stand in the doorway of a life they did not help build. But the one meant to recognize your soul will not need chaos to prove connection. They will bring calm that feels unfamiliar at first. That calm may even frighten you. Because when you have been trained to expect uncertainty, steady love can feel suspicious. You may wonder where the hidden cost is. You may search for the pattern, the shift, the moment when warmth becomes distance. But listen. Not every gentle thing is waiting to hurt you. Some gentle things are heaven's way of showing you that safety can have a voice, a presence, a timing, a name. And the name has not been spoken fully yet. That is why this moment matters. Someone is closer to revealing what they have been holding back. They have been watching the way you carry yourself after disappointment. They have seen your heart remain soft without becoming naive. They have noticed that your silence is not emptiness, it is discernment. And soon, a conversation may open a door you did not know was unlocked. It may begin with something ordinary. A message. A question. A small act of honesty. But beneath it will be something much deeper, a soul finally brave enough to say, in its own way, I saw what happened, and I chose differently. Do not rush to define it. Do not force it into the shape of your expectations. Let it breathe. The most meaningful chapters often begin quietly because they are not trying to impress the crowd. They are trying to reach the heart. And yours has been reached before by the wrong hands. This time, heaven is teaching you to notice the difference. The person who left revealed what could not stay. The person who stepped away from them revealed what could not be compromised. But the one approaching now, they are about to reveal something you have never experienced in this way before. Because when they finally speak, you will realize they did not only cut someone off because of what they found out about you. They cut them off because of what they found out about themselves. And that truth may change everything. By the time the truth reached your heart, it no longer sounded like a shock. It sounded like peace. The kind of peace that does not arrive loudly. It settles slowly, like light entering a room where the curtains had been closed for years. At first, you only notice a small line of brightness on the floor. Then, without warning, you realize the whole room has changed. That is what happened within you. Something stopped begging. Something stopped explaining. Something stopped reaching for a hand that kept opening and closing depending on its mood. And in that quiet release, heaven whispered a deeper message. Not everyone who leaves your life is rejecting you. Some people are simply unable to walk beside the version of you that no longer abandons itself. That is why they cut someone off. Not because your story was small. Because your story became too real to ignore. They heard something about you, something simple, something almost ordinary, and it rearranged what they thought they knew. Maybe they learned how deeply you had been hurt and still chose softness. Maybe they discovered how much you had carried without making others feel guilty for it. Maybe they saw that your love was never weakness, it was discipline, mercy, and quiet strength wearing a gentle face. And suddenly, the person they had been entertaining did not look the same anymore. A comparison happened in silence. No announcement. No dramatic scene. Just a soul recognizing the difference between noise and depth. Between attention and devotion. Between someone who fills space and someone who feels like home. But here is the part that may make your breath pause. They did not cut that person off only because of what they found out about you. They cut them off because of what they found out about themselves. Your name exposed a truth they had been avoiding. They were settling for a connection that did not awaken their better nature. They were laughing in places where their spirit felt tired. They were answering messages that entertained them, but did not elevate them. They were staying close to what was familiar because what was meaningful required courage. Then you became the mirror. Not by trying. Not by chasing. Not by proving. Just by being the kind of person whose absence still carries weight. That is rare. And rare things are not always understood quickly. For a while, they tried to dismiss the feeling. They told themselves it was nothing. They stayed busy. They let distractions gather around them like smoke. But some truths do not disappear because we look away. They wait. Patiently. Calmly. Almost mercifully. Then one moment came. A message. A conversation. A small detail. Something about you reached them at the exact place where their heart had been guarded, and suddenly the distance between what they had, and what they truly desired, became impossible to unsee. That was the turning point. Not the ending. The turning point. Because once a person recognizes what peace feels like, chaos begins to lose its charm. Still, you must understand this with tenderness. Their awakening is not your assignment to manage. You are not being asked to wait at the window of uncertainty. You are not being asked to pause your joy until another heart becomes brave. Your path is sacred even when no one is catching up to it. Keep walking. Softly. Clearly. Without bitterness. Because the most powerful version of you is not the one who gets chosen by someone else. It is the one who finally stops choosing pain just because it once felt like love. And now, something beautiful is forming around you. You may not see the full shape of it yet, but you can feel the atmosphere changing. Certain things no longer tempt you. Certain voices no longer shake you. Certain memories still visit, but they no longer own the room. That is healing. Not forgetting. Not pretending. Healing is when the past knocks, and your peace no longer rushes to open the door. There is a holy calm rising in you, and it is making space for what can meet you honestly. No masks. No emotional guessing games. No love that makes you feel alone while standing beside it. But before this next chapter steps fully into view, one final test of the heart must unfold. It will not look like a test. It may come as a familiar name. A sudden message. A quiet reminder of what once pulled you backward. And in that moment, you will finally see whether you have been healed enough to receive love, or only wounded enough to miss being wanted. Because the next choice you make will not just reveal who they are. It will reveal who you have become. The final realization did not arrive as thunder. It came softly. It came in the quiet place where your heart stopped asking, "Why did they leave?" and began asking, "What did their leaving reveal?" That question changed everything. Because the moment you stopped treating their distance as proof that you were unworthy, the entire story turned in your hands like a hidden key. Suddenly, the silence was no longer a wall. It was a mirror. And in that mirror, you saw what heaven had been trying to show you all along. You were not abandoned. You were being separated from confusion. You were not forgotten. You were being returned to yourself. The one who cut someone off after discovering the truth about you was not acting from perfect wisdom or perfect courage. They were reacting to what your presence exposed. Your softness had depth. Your patience had limits. Your love had discernment. And your soul carried something rare, the ability to walk through pain without becoming pain. That is what unsettled them. Not because you were dangerous. Because you were clear. And clarity has a way of disturbing every false connection built on convenience, control, or half-truths. But here is where the story takes its final turn. The person meant to meet you in your next chapter will not be drawn to your wounds as a place to feel powerful. They will be drawn to your healing as a place to feel honest. They will not need you smaller, quieter, more uncertain, or easier to explain. They will recognize your peace. And they will protect it. You may not know their name yet. You may not know the hour, the road, the conversation, or the ordinary moment that opens the door. But you will know the feeling. It will not feel like chasing. It will not feel like begging. It will not feel like proving your soul to someone committed to misunderstanding it. It will feel calm. Like breathing after years of holding your breath. And when that moment comes, something inside you will understand why the old story could not continue. Not because it never mattered, but because it could not carry the weight of who you were becoming. Some endings are not failures. They are mercy written in a language the heart learns slowly. So let the past keep the lessons, but not your light. Let the unanswered questions remain where they belong, behind you. Let the person who misunderstood you walk their own road without turning your heart into a courtroom. You do not need to win the story. You only need to be free from it. And now, as this chapter closes, heaven leaves one final whisper over your life. The truth about you did not push love away. It pushed false love aside. What remains will find you differently. More gently. More honestly. More deeply than anything you had to convince to stay. And just when you think the story has ended, a quiet sign will appear, so ordinary that others may miss it, but your spirit will not. Because this time, you will not be looking for someone to complete you. You will be standing whole. And the one meant to recognize you will know exactly what they have found.